afternoon, everybody. So I know it's a lunch time. A lot of people, I think, already left for lunch. So it's going to be a very interesting topic. Nilesh is going to talk about freemium game design. To give some context about Nilesh, he started his first mobile gaming company in 2007 December. That talks, right? Mobile casual gaming company in 2007. Apple actually releasing a SDK for iPhone, iOS. So that's his profile. He's in the industry for more than 5 years now. All his career, last 5 years, he's into the gaming. So he's going to talk about freemium game design, how to develop free applications and monetize them. What are the best strategies he's going to adopt and learn over a period of time. So take over, Nilesh.
Okay. Thanks, Ravi. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, awesome. Okay, so, I wasn't, when I planned this and when I imagined this, I wasn't expecting such a big hall. And, I was actually mentally preparing myself for more of a, an informal interaction. So I figured, I'd speak for 10 odd minutes and hopefully quick to move to Q&A, which I thought would be a lot more, productive. But this being a much bigger auditorium, let me see if I can walk through at least some of my slides. And I would like you to interrupt me at any point if you have any questions. I would rather run it this way because I don't necessarily have a very fixed plan saying, these are the points I have to cover. So, we can move to a quick open-ended discussion as soon as possible. I want to cover, this. I'm primarily addressing folks who start off, and that's I think most of us here. We have, a lot of the people I meet are, they can code a bit. They know they have this cool idea and they want to build this awesome game, and they know it's going to work if they just get it out there. That's usually a great beginning, but what I want to cover here is, that the 50 or 100 additional things that you need to do on top of building that good game with a good idea and some good mechanics. There's a bunch of things that you need to do if you're going to make your game freemium, and just building a good game with some good mechanics doesn't really cut it. So that's what I want to cover. I guess to start with a bit of theory. So we know why we build games. I guess the first thing to remember is, of course, apart from the kind of media, the form of media that this is, interactive compared to, novels or movies and so on. This is a lot more interactive. You invite the player to put in some input, and that impacts the way the game progresses and so on. But a lot more interesting aspect, which, we tend to forget when we watch a game on TV or when we're playing, hide and seek as kids, we forget that any game is essentially a completely arbitrary set of rules that you just make up. Now, the reason games are fun is that, these rules allow social interaction around them. You argue with players, you're playing Monopoly, which is a completely made up, arbitrary set of rules. Why should you go to jail? But, somebody made up that rule. But, there's a lot of social interaction which makes these games fun. And there needs to be a sense of fairness. The game needs, the rules need to be internally consistent. Those are the two things we keep in mind, when we come up with a game, The reason I bring this up is that when it comes to freemium, there's one more rule to keep in mind. Freemium is not as simple as, for instance, you play with another player and you lose, and, now you pay $1 and you will win. If you did something as simple as that, that's unfair. The freemium model in, freemium game design should focus not on pay to win, but on pay to play more. And if that gives you an advantage, because you spend time and you spend more time in the game and you spend time, learning more strategies, and that gives you an advantage which lets you win or get past other players, that would be considered fair. But, just a direct pay to win is considered unfair. This, I think, is, we're going to discuss this a little more. When you start with, when you first get a download and you have your first, the player sees your game for the first time, it's important to remember that they are very, very eager to leave. They have 10-15 seconds. You actually have the first 3 or 4 seconds in which to capture their attention enough to say, okay, you can stay here, stay with this game for another 10 seconds, and within those 10 seconds you have to introduce something which would then keep them for maybe a minute. And if you get past that hurdle, then you probably have a tutorial now, being introduced, and you're walking the players through the game and so on. Now, this is a common problem that I've seen a lot of developers and friends do. You start off, freemium. We all know you let the player play for 5-10 levels, and then you hit a roadblock and so on. Now, the game at the outset needs to be so simple that there's no way of there's no way that the player would confuse a deliberate roadblock with a navigation issue. Because if you run into one of those, the player is gone. You have 45 seconds, and the player leaves. So, yeah. Again, this I think this slide again relates to folks who are very excited about their game. They know they've done this, new mechanic. They have some awesome art which gets introduced only at level 20, or they have some cool features. Maybe there's invite friends or share with friends or challenge friends. There's a lot of stuff going on. You obviously designed for 3 months or more of gameplay, because that's how you would do a freemium game. The tutorial, it's a tempting space here, where in the tutorial you say you have to show the player all of this, otherwise how will they know how cool the game is? And that's a mistake, because when the tutorial takes too long and it tries to do too much, you will basically lose the player, because it's an information overload. I would use the metaphor of say like a 7-course dinner. You're not going to put it all on the plate and say okay, be impressed. That's not how it would work. You would serve the first course, and hopefully the setup, the dinner table setup would indicate to the player that there's a lot more to come. You would have to rely on that. That's how the game would have to work. Now, I think instead of doing a whole walkthrough where you tell the player this is all the cool stuff that's going to happen in the game, and okay, you haven't looked at this yet, or tap on that, and you show them everything. If you do it that way, you will tire the player out. You will give them an information overload, and they just quit on you. Focus on I listed 3 things, but ideally try and focus on just 2 in the tutorial. Navigation should be important. People, the player should figure out what is where in this game. What does the store button offer? What does the menu button do? Where do you go if you tap on the quest button? Basic navigation. If you're doing a farming game, where do you access crops from? Where do you access farm plots from? Whatever it is that you're building. Navigation. Give them, this takes, depending on how you're doing it, this could take 2 to 3 seconds to maybe even 15 seconds, but, it shouldn't take more than that to tell the player, what is the game about? What's the game universe? Is it, Temple Run is the universe where, it's a sliver of a corner of a large universe in which, you're stealing an idol and running. It's a good enough introduction. It takes 3 seconds to tell the player what this is. Introduce the game universe. Give them a sense of purpose. Are you capturing somebody? Are you rescuing something? Are you, collecting something? Whatever it is, explain that. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, be quick, and make sure the players understand what constitutes progress within the framework of this game. Does it involve killing monsters? Does it involve, saving some characters? Does it involve chasing something down or collecting? Whatever it is, what constitutes progress or success in the framework of this game? I think, depending on, again, this is very open-ended. So depending on what type of game you're building, you might want to, plan this carefully. But I would say a tutorial should be, 3-4 minutes at best, and design it to have no more than 30-40 taps for the player. It can't be like in 3 minutes you had them tap 500 times. So not too much effort, not too long, and cover only the quick basics. That's what the tutorial should do. This is really the crux of what I'm trying to say, which is slow down for the player. As developers, we have this complex system in our heads. We say this is all that the game can do, and this is going to be so much fun for you. But slow it down for the player. For example, we all know about core loops. You have a farming game. You have a basic core loop where you plant some seeds, then you wait, then you harvest, and then you collect, and then you again plant. That's a basic core loop. That's a that core loop will keep a player engaged for maybe 2 weeks if you're lucky. Although you'll lose them much before that. So obviously you need for 6-8 months of entertainment, you need a complicated core loop. And the way to do this is to typically have this larger core loop, and within the individual steps of each step of that core loop, you can add in a smaller loop of its own. For example, if you're doing, say, a farming game, you could add a complication where now you combine various seeds to create some super crop, something hybrid, or maybe that involves research, maybe that involves hiring scientists, maybe it becomes a little more resource management, but that expands the first step of the core loop. You could do the same with harvesting. Now you need different types of farm plots. Maybe you import soil from another country in order to grow the super crops and so on. And you can then expand that particular step of the core loop, planting, and then harvesting could also similarly be expanded with So the point is, you will end up, it is necessary that you have a very complex core loop. If you're going to have a successful freemium game, something that keeps players engaged for over 6 months, you will need a complex, large core loop. But don't make the mistake of introducing all of it at one go, because again you will overwhelm your players. Cut it down. You have a large core loop. Now brutally get it back to the basics. I would say a basic rule should be a rule of thumb. It should be your complications of your core loop, where you are adding smaller loops. That should not be introduced until the player is thoroughly familiar with the basic core loop. So at the outset of the game, you only do plant, harvest, and so on. Do it about 10 times. Make the player do it about 10 times. Make sure they got it right with multiple crops or whatever, and then say, okay, now you can grow, create your own seeds or super crops or whatever. The example could vary, but the principle again is the same. If you're doing a freemium game, you have you could lose a player in 3 seconds or less. You cannot afford to give them any complicated information that they're not ready for. You have to take it very, very slow. Don't rush players, and when you're all of this is focused on retention. If you do that right, then you have some hope of monetization. This basically again as far as pacing the game is concerned, we tend to I tend to do it calculate in terms of initially, of course, you'll allow the players to level up real quick. In half an hour you'll level up. If you play the game, or in 2 sessions, or 10 taps or whatever. Later you slow it down. Now, I like to calculate it in terms of number of taps required. 50 taps. From levels 5 to 15. You can level up by tapping 50 times. Specific actions. It could be a quest, it could be a battle, it could be collecting something, harvesting something, whatever it is. But actions in the game, each one gets you, let's say, 1 XP or 2 XP, whatever. You'll 50 taps and you should level up. Level 15 onwards, slow it down. Now you need 150 taps. At a certain time, hold it steady. 300 taps are required to level up. From level 30 onwards or some such. Now, if you're using the energy mechanic, 300 taps translates to maybe at 70 or 80 energy cap. You're allowing players 4 or 5 sessions a day, and thereafter they need to spend money if they want to level up faster and so on. Count it in terms of I find it easier to count it in terms of the amount of effort involved. 50 taps or 500 taps to level up. I like to calculate it from there and then work my way backwards to what does that mean in terms of what is the energy bar, what the energy bar is going to be like? What does it mean in terms of how much can we monetize from, the energy mechanic on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, and so on. Now, I'll, this is the other key point that I wanted to cover. Beyond that, like I said, I'm not necessarily following a very structured presentation here, but some key points that I'm trying to cover. So, store design is again extremely important. Now, let's say this is all I'm talking with the assumption that you have this cool game idea, and it's really worth building, and you have nailed that part of it. And on top of that idea, now you're building the freemium game, the freemium gaming model. So, we talked about not losing players at the tutorial. Don't get carried away. Don't try to show off. Keep it simple, and so on. But all of this is done. The players have figured out, how the game works. They know, okay, I need to, harvest crops or collect animals or, battle other players or, challenge other players or whatever it is. Now, with all of that in place, you need to now make sure that they actually know where to spend money. And that's trickier than you think, It's not enough to just place a store button on the main game screen, top right, prominent, gold and red and whatever. It's not enough to just place that button and have it all catchy, because the player will come to the store the first time. The first time they're not, the first visit, they're not going to, you haven't yet convinced them that, it's worth it to spend the money here. They're too new. They're just looking. And they see, okay, you have 5 tabs, you have crops, houses, whatever it is, whatever is the content, the virtual goods of your game. They see it one time and they won't buy and they leave. And the next day when they come back, maybe they'll look around another 10 seconds. They're out there. The third time they'll say, okay, it's the same old stuff. And then they'll start to block that button from their minds. It becomes a blind spot. They're like, same old. It's a bit like, on the Facebook app on your phone, how many times do you go to your profile tab? We don't, because there's nothing new there. We know that. Now, that's the risk you cannot take. The players have to know that the store button always has something new to offer. There's a reason why, when you walk into a mall, every store is, it's going crazy trying to tell you that, there's something new. And there's discount, there's new stock, there is, winter collection or summer collection or, some offer or something or the other. They have to make the effort to show, there's something new here. Because, there's a good chance that you walk past the store last week and you're going to think, hey, it's the same old stuff. No store can risk that, including your virtual store in the game. So, like I said, take lessons from retail. Now, one of the popular mechanics that we are using in our game, which is launching in a few weeks, in a couple of weeks. A popular mechanic that we are also using is giving players something random that needs to be redeemed in the store. Now, it's a daily reward function that we use. You come back on the third day, you get, say, some silver coins or some tickets or whatever. That can be used, that can be spent only in the store. Now, this stuff keeps piling up. And, you have these redemption tickets or coins or whatever. It's a bit like, just as an example, your credit card company, they give you these points, loyalty points or whatever. They could easily just give you cash back. They just say, we'll give you, 30 rupees or whatever, But they make you go through this because, it's like, first of all, it feels good to have something for free and then you convert it to something that apparently you're choosing. It's a very powerful mechanic psychologically from, consumer psychology perspective. So you give them something, you give them, in our game we give them these tickets and you keep collecting them, you don't have to do anything, you just come back to the game and you'll get a bunch of them. Now, in order to do something with those, you need to go into the store and we'll force the players to the store practically every other day, if not every day. Something or the other, you have these tickets, now you go redeem them and then we give them five choices, across multiple tabs that we have, whatever categories we have, in our game, cards and so on. If you have a farming game, you'll have, crops and houses and trees or whatever. You can redeem these tickets for those and, that would end up pushing the player to the store and they learn that there's something new this time. So you have, again, you have to place make sure there's something new happening. Make sure they are familiar with the store. Predictable navigation. Again, every grocery store is organized in a certain way, and that really works. That's kind of what you should be doing here also. Do not rearrange your tabs post launch. Do not rearrange. If you place 3 different trees or 3 different crops in a certain order in your store, don't just reshuffle them because you can. Players want predictable navigation. Add new content first in the store, and everything else should remain as it was on the last visit. I don't know if you're familiar with anchor pricing, but that works really well. Place one outrageously priced item, $49.99 for this crop, super crop, or whatever. Place one of those at the beginning, and the player will scroll past that. If they buy it, good, you're doing something right. But if they skip past that, they know that this was $49, but the next thing is, well, $4.99, which sounds like a deal. This works also from the perspective that players want to reward themselves. It's like in an electronic showroom. You walk in, and the first glass display is that new fancy smart TV that costs 3 lakhs and whatever, right? Large screen. You're not going to buy that, but that's tempting. And then when you walk in, you like the other things that are cheaper, and you feel like rewarding yourself, considering you've been so disciplined in not giving into temptation. You just exercise some financial control. You did something right, and now you're going to reward yourself. Anchor pricing works extremely well in virtual stores also. In your game, have these items placed in a way where something costs $29, another thing costs $4.99 or $6.99, and so on. And make sure the players are aware of these choices by because they're coming there every day. How are we doing on time? I tend to lose track. Yeah, so that should be good. Okay, I think I talked about the store part of it well enough. I think again this depends on the kind of game you're doing. So this is going to be very general, but some standard mechanics are most of them are related to time. Players want to save time, and most of the mechanics are built around that. So energy or wait or speed up. Speed up to when you buy something, and you have to wait to deliver, or you're constructing something and it waits. You have to wait. Energy, obviously, 50 taps, 70 taps, and you're out of energy. Now you need to come back 2 hours later, and so on. Everything is about saving time in that category. There's of course premium content, and this is more about bragging rights and rivalry. If you build up enough rivalry among players, it's worth it for them to spend $1 on something that the other players do not have. That rivalry is something, it needs to come as part of your game concept. It's not something you could just add on top. But if your game is around such rivalry, is focused on giving players experience around such rivalry, then you could do well on premium content and bragging rights quite a bit. Consumables are a big deal. Energy, of course, is a good mechanic. You buy a refill for $1, and it runs out in a session, and then you buy, you spend another $1 the next day, and so on. But there are other ways to do it. There's, I think, Clash of Clans, for instance, does a very good job of, offering consumables as premium, as virtual goods. Now, all of this, it's easy to, as someone who's in control of the game system and the game universe, and who's coming up with all the rules, it's tempting to say, it's tempting to think that you're in charge and you want to, retain control of the game experience, but that's ideally not how it should be. If you look at, as an example, if you look at the rules of Monopoly, it's pretty standard. You have, a set of rules, a certain set of winning conditions, and so on. But the fun with Monopoly all happens around the social interaction. When you sit down to play with 4 or 6 other players, that's when the fun begins. All the yelling and screaming and the bargaining and the name calling and so on. None of that is written in the rules, but the game of Monopoly acts as a structure around which this social interaction can take place. Now, your game needs to be built that way also. Make sure your game is fun, the rules are fair and understandable and, coherent and so on. But once you have all of that in place, you need to treat all of that as a foundation for a collaborative gameplay which is open-ended, where players derive a meaning of their own. Players bring meaning to the game on their own, and that's not something you want to be in control of, because you want to create a system where players bring in their meaning and bring in their interaction and their experience. That's the system you want to create, not a system where you're absolutely in charge of every bit of this entertainment experience. If you wanted to do that, you're better off making a movie. Retention design, I guess, this is, I don't know if, how familiar we are with this, but, some standard mechanics, you need to make sure that every time the player quits a session, they've left something ongoing that for which they need to come back. It's pretty standard. Clash of Clans, they'll make you quit the game after you start training your troops, and 25 minutes later you need to come back. There's an ongoing action that needs your attention after it's completed, and there's a wait time. This is a good way to bring players back to the game, which is really what retention mechanics are all about. Push notifications work extremely well especially if you have rivalry or battling or competition related mechanics in the game, where so and so just stole a player just stole something from you, so come check it out. Again, Clash of Clans is a good example. We're pretty much done now. Yeah, so I'll quickly sign off with how we are planning to do the launch. Now this is we're launching a card collection game in a couple of weeks for for the US market. That's the target. But our launch is planned around smaller territories first, and we'll launch to maybe New Zealand, maybe Australia, maybe Turkey. A few territories. Spend a small amount to get a few thousand users and monitor the metrics. For the soft launch, we're looking at, and this is what developers typically do. Don't get your hopes up. Don't say this is going to, people will notice the game. People will suddenly start talking about it. That will not happen. You have to take it slow. No matter how much effort you put in, you'll find that in the soft launch, you'll find that you missed so many things, and you're doing so much information overload. You're giving the player too much information too soon without giving them the context or the time to process it. This will happen, and this is where you will want to do the soft launch. Try and monitor only retention for the first soft launch at least. I would recommend a couple of soft launches, ideally in different territories. But do the first soft launch. If your retention is at the absolute minimum of 20% on day one in your soft launch, you probably have a decent game on your hands that is worth pursuing. If it's less than that, you might want to just scrap it and move on. Unless you think that there's some very specific big gap, some glaring gap that you left and you completely forgot to address. If you find something like that, then go back, fix it, and try it again. But the absolute minimum is 20%, and that's pretty bad. I'm saying if you have it at 20% day one retention, you have a chance of making a successful game. But anything below that, you should probably just move on. Your retention is the most important metric during the soft launch. We could talk a whole lot about monetization, but I don't know if I want to get into that right now. That's going to be a whole lot of benchmarks and a whole lot of it's going to be very specific, and I wanted to cover more in terms of like I said, I see a lot of people with a lot of they have this brilliant idea. They know it's going to be something unique, but they get carried away, showing it off, in just showing it off instead of building a game carefully and introducing the player to the game very, very carefully. So that's the main part I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, we could go into that, and anything in terms of monetization, retention, metrics, launch plans, marketing spend, and ad spend, anything along those lines, I'll just leave it for a later discussion. I think 2:15 I'm supposed to be, I don't know, I'm supposed to, it's like a speaker interaction thing. I don't know where exactly I'm going to be, but you can all catch me over there for those discussions. So I'd be happy to take questions if you have any.
Hey, thanks for that session. Just really quickly, you covered a lot of aspects that sort of can be improved and done well with best practices. Which apps do you think resonate with that right now on the App Store?
Okay, I'm an iOS user, not an Android user. Not only because our game is going on
both stores is perfect.
Yeah, so any store. So I've liked Candy Crush. I thought the way it carefully introduced the mechanics was very, very well done. The complications increased very gradually, and the level design was perfect. Where when I did fail, the margin of failure was so slight that I just wanted to go in and have a go at it again. So I thought that was a very, very well done game. I stopped playing Heyday a little too soon, and I should go back. But I really like the way that game also worked. Initially they impressed you with a lot of visual, a very fun-looking visual environment and easy navigation. Where the menu just drops down and so on. Very well done navigation and a good visual environment. And the complications to the mechanics started very gradually. First, it was only clean something, then plant, and then harvest, and then they introduced the bakery. Then they introduced grow the you have to you have to bake the bread, or create fodder for animals, or you have to clean up that machine. All of those complications started very, very gradually, one thing at a time. They always gave me enough time to learn what I was doing there. So I think Heyday is a very good example. Probably Clash of Clans also, but I've just not managed to play it. I don't know why, but I haven't just played it enough. So.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So last year, me and one of my very close friends, we did an Android game. It's a word game, and we're still not done with it. We're still figuring out some of the things that you mentioned. I really liked your talk. What are your thoughts on? I'm sure you've heard of letterpress on iOS.
Right.
So I don't know how often you've played it, but of all the of all the games that I know of on iOS and Android, letterpress is one of my favorite games because it seems to be an outlier in terms of everything that you've mentioned so far. It doesn't try hard. In fact, it doesn't try anything at all. It's just such a It's just such a good looking game, or in general, I say that such a gripping game to look at. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so incredibly popular. But in general, I fail to understand why. What exactly did letterpress had going for it that made it such a popular game?
Okay, so so letterpress has basically. I think they only have, and I have played it quite a bit, and I think it took me like 2 or 3 days to decide. I'm going to spend $1 to unlock those features. So I played like 2 or 3 games on it, and then I said, let's spend that $1. So I have played it quite well. I like the interface. I think that's a big success. It was something new. It stood apart from the other games. The navigation, the little touches of animation where you delete a game and it bursts apart. It's just so much fun. It's very well done. It does have a restriction, however, that it will only make $1 from a user at most, and that's okay if you're keeping your costs low. Now, letterpress is not committing to, letterpress is an open-ended game. It's like it's a bit like Monopoly again. It's basically a board game. You have a set of rules, and the entertainment experience is up to you based on who you play with. You might have a very boring game if you run into a weak player, or you might have a thrilling, challenging game if you run into the right player. I don't know if letterpress does a lot in terms of matching the opponents correctly, but that's some logic they could improve. But essentially, they're down to 2 million downloads equals 2 million in revenue if their conversion is 100%. Now, that's not necessarily the model that I was discussing here. That's a great model if you have a small game that will keep players engaged for a bit. It's a few days of entertainment, or one game a week. You keep playing on and off with your friends. Then it's the right model. But that's probably not the model I was addressing here. So I'm talking more in terms of the Heyday, Clash of Clans, Farmville, or games along those lines, or Candy Crush. You're okay?
Hi. Hello. Hi, this is Kailash. I had a question that every day we have new device in market. So how do you manage your QA activity? Because the screen sizes are different, OSs are different, and there are more than 125 brands in market. So also your development team and QA team sit together. So how do you manage that stuff?
Okay, so the game that I mentioned is going on iOS only for now. Actually, iPhone only. We're just keeping it very, very simple for the soft launch. We'll do iPad later, then we'll add Android. Assuming the metrics are right for the iOS platform, we'll add in Android as soon as possible. We'll hopefully within 2 to 3 months. Typically, though, the right strategy is to focus on doing things right for a small audience than to risk messing it up for a big audience. So on Android, when we do get to building our game on Android in a couple of months, I would say build it only for the Samsung devices first, just because could be could be HTC devices, doesn't matter. Just pick any one set of devices. Then say Samsung devices 2012 and after, or only the Galaxy series 2 and onwards or 3 and onwards. Any arbitrary, it doesn't really matter. Any arbitrary limitation, keep it simple. Don't take on too much when you first have to figure out, especially if you're launching directly on Android, and you don't yet know your retention metrics. You don't yet know how players are reacting to the game, or whether your mechanics are working well enough. There's no sense in taking on the problem of testing for 100 plus devices. I would keep it simple. Pick any 4 devices, launch, then add another 4, and then I would do it that way.
Yeah, but your app will be live on the App Store, Play Store. So any layman will come and download. So will you give a prompt before that this is only for supported these devices, or
okay?
How
With Apple, if you're not supporting older devices, I think the iTunes Store will not allow you to. You're saying not compatible with. I was assuming that that works for Android also, where you go to the Google Play Store and it says compatible with. It'll basically tell you if it's compatible with your device or not, and if it's not, you won't be able to download. So that does work, right? Exactly, right. So that's a simple enough control where you won't run into issues where your app is your game is being installed on unsupported devices and you're running into those issues. That shouldn't really happen. So just as long as you're very clear that I'm only supporting, don't do this thing where okay, we tested on Galaxy 4, therefore 3 should also possibly work. Let's just add it in. As long as you're not doing that, you should be safe.
Hi, this is
Oh.
yeah. Hi, this is Abhiram. So, what are your suggestions on selecting the appropriate game engines? So many commercial studios, they use the commercial license engines. So how do you suggest on going with open source game engines? Are they?
I don't. That's not really my area. I'm not the technical guy. I'm the design guy. But so far as I don't know much about open source game engines, but I do know that games now need to be more and more 3D and rich environment and so on. And if you're starting development now, you're looking at if you're doing a rich full scale freemium game, you're looking at launching maybe mid next year if you're very lucky, on a soft launch, and prepare for what games will be like then, as against what you're seeing now, which to me means pick a good game engine that makes things easy for you and allows you to handle a lot of heavy graphics, 3D environments and camera panning and whatever is required based on your idea. Okay, so we're out of time, but like I said, you can all catch me. I'll be around, so you can catch me elsewhere if you have questions or if you want to discuss anything. Thanks.